You are handing your license out through the window. And while you are doing it, his other hand goes to your door handle. It does not open. And he says 3 words, flat, without a question mark on the end of them. Unlock your car. It sounds like an instruction, and it is built to. There is no please on the front of it, and no question mark on the end. And almost everybody in that seat reaches straight for the button, because you have not done anything, because you would like this to be over, and because refusing feels like the sort of thing a guilty man does. Here is the thing I want you to notice, and it is the whole video. He is asking. A man who could open that door would have opened it. He would not be standing at your window negotiating with your manners. So in the next 15 minutes, what a vehicle search in this country actually turns on, which is not what most people think. Why the asking itself is information. And the sentence to say, word for word, that keeps the door shut without breaking a single law. I am Oliver Bennett. 15 years in police stations and courtrooms across England and Wales, which is the jurisdiction for everything in this video. Scotland runs on a different system, and I will not pretend otherwise. This is not legal advice, and I am not your solicitor. It is what the law says, in plain English, so that you are not hearing it for the first time at the side of a road at 11 at night with a torch in your face. Let us start with what you genuinely must do, because I am not going to sell you a fantasy where you can refuse everything. There is a real duty here, and it is worth knowing precisely. Section 163 of the Road Traffic Act 1988. You must stop. That is a real duty. Failing to comply is an offence, and I would not argue with it at the roadside for any amount of money. So stop. Pull over properly, engine off, interior light on if it is dark, hands where he can see them. Being straightforward about the part that genuinely binds you is what buys you credibility for the part that does not. But read what that section actually says, because it says stop. Stop the vehicle. There is nothing in those words about opening anything, and there is nothing in them about your door. Now the part that catches decent people, and it catches them precisely because they are decent. This is not a trick aimed at criminals. Criminals, on the whole, already know to say no. This one is built for the man who has never been in trouble in his life and does not want to start now. The whole move is built on your manners. You have nothing in the car. You want this over with. He is standing there in the rain doing a difficult job, and you are, fundamentally, a polite person. So you press the button, because refusing feels rude, and rude feels like guilty. It is not. Being polite is not the same as agreeing to everything, and this is the one place in an ordinary life where the difference between those two things is worth money. And notice who is doing the work in that sentence. He is not opening the door, he is asking you to open it. In an encounter where he genuinely has the power to search, that is not how it goes at all. He tells you what is about to happen, and then it happens. I have read a great many custody records and watched a great deal of body-worn footage, and the pattern is remarkably consistent. Where there are grounds, the language is flat and declarative. I'm going to search this vehicle under Section 1 of PACE. I'm looking for stolen goods, and here is why. Where there are no grounds, the language turns into a request wearing the clothes of an instruction. Unlock it for me. Pop the boot. Do you mind if I have a quick look? The grammar itself tells you which one you are in. 3 things people do at that window, all of them coming from exactly the same instinct, the wish to be seen as reasonable. They press the unlock button to seem helpful. They open the door and get out before anybody has asked them to. And they begin explaining their evening, unprompted, at some length, to a man who is writing it down. Every one of those hands over something you cannot take back. The first opens a car nobody had grounds to open. The second puts you outside a vehicle you did not have to leave. And the third is you doing the work of building a case against yourself while being helpful about it. And the first of the 3 is a sound, a click. Half a second, no words said, nothing signed. And afterwards it is your word about what you agreed to against his. Now here is the hinge, and this is where our law is genuinely different from what you may have seen on American channels, and better for you, which I do not often get to say. In America the argument runs, do not consent, because consent is the thing the officer is missing. Here, consent is not the ingredient. A search of your vehicle is lawful because of the grounds, not because of your permission. Section 1, subsection 3 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. It does not give a power to search a vehicle unless there are reasonable grounds for suspecting stolen or prohibited articles will be found. And that cuts in both directions, so hear the second half of it as clearly as the first. If he has the grounds, your refusal does not remove them. If he does not have the grounds, your agreement does not create them. And there is a line in the Code of Practice that governs all of this, which I think is the single most useful sentence a British driver could know, and I've almost never heard anybody quote it. An officer must not search, even with consent, where no power to search applies. Even where a person is willing to submit voluntarily, they must not be searched unless the necessary legal power exists. Read what that does. Your agreement is not a substitute for a power. It never was. In this country, an officer is not permitted to search his way into a position he had no authority to reach in the first place, and your willingness does not hand him that authority. I want to be careful here, because this is a code of practice rather than a section of an act, and somebody in the comments will say so. It is not decorative. Codes of practice under PACE are what officers are trained on, what supervisors are audited against, and what gets read out when a search is challenged afterwards. A search conducted with no power and defended on the basis that you did not object is not in a strong position when somebody comes to look at it. And the exception written into that paragraph tells you how narrowly it is meant. The one place consent alone is enough is a search on the way into a sports ground or similar premises where you agreed to it as a condition of going in. That is the entire carve-out. A road is not on that list, which means the question at that window is never really whether you agreed. The question is whether there were grounds. And if there were grounds, nobody needed to ask you to press a button. And grounds is not a vague word, and it is not whatever the officer happens to feel at the time. The Code of Practice sets out what it actually has to consist of, and it comes in two halves, both of which have to be there. There must be a genuine suspicion, actually formed. And there must be an objective basis for it, in facts, information, or intelligence. Both. A hunch on its own is not grounds, and neither is a policy of stopping a certain sort of car. And the code is blunt about one thing in particular. Personal factors can never support reasonable suspicion. Not your age, not your appearance, not the fact that you happen to be driving a car somebody would not expect you to be driving. There is one more line worth having in your head. Any detention for the purposes of a search must be brief, and it must take place at or near where you were stopped. That is a real constraint, and it is the answer to the encounter that has quietly turned into 40 minutes on a verge while somebody decides what to do with you. None of this means you argue the grounds at the roadside. You will not win that, and it is not the venue. What it means is that you know what the standard is, so that if it was never met, you are able to say so afterwards, in writing, to somebody whose job is to look at it properly. Everything I have quoted so far has a section number attached, and that is exactly what the handbook is. Know Your Rights is the written version of this channel, every power set out with the statute it comes from and the words to use for each one. It is at nowrightsuk.gumroad.com/l/know-your-rights. Point your phone at that code and I will carry on. It covers the traffic stop, the search, your doorstep and your phone in one place, in plain English, because the moment you actually need this, you will not be in a position to look anything up. And to be plain about what you would be buying, every statute in it is free on legislation.gov.uk, and the duty solicitor is free at any hour. What the book saves you is the finding and the wording. If you would rather look it up yourself, look it up yourself. Right, the sentence itself. This is the one to have ready before you need it, because nobody composes anything useful at a car window with a torch in their face at 11 at night. I want you to hear it once at normal speed, and then we will take it apart clause by clause, and I will show you what each half is actually doing. I'm not consenting to a search. If you have grounds, tell me the power and I won't obstruct you. That is it. 20 words, 2 clauses, and nothing in it that a reasonable officer could take exception to, which is the entire point of how it is built. Say it calmly, through a gap in the window, hands visible, in the voice you would use to give someone directions. It is not a challenge, and it must not sound like one. Now what each half is doing. The first half, I'm not consenting to a search, closes the easy route. It means nobody can later suggest you invited anybody in, and, after code A 1.5, it means the search now has to stand on the power alone. The second half is the part people leave out, and it is the half that keeps you safe. If you have grounds, tell me the power and I won't obstruct you. You have just said, on his body cam, that you will not obstruct a lawful search. You are not refusing anything. You are asking him to say out loud which power he is using, which the code requires him to have before he searches at all. If he has it, he will name it, and you step aside and let him get on with it. Now, the distinction that matters more than anything else in this video, and if you take one single thing away from the whole of it, make it this one rather than the sentence. Getting this wrong is how a man who was entirely in the right ends up in the back of a van. Declining to consent is lawful. It is not obstruction. It is not an offence in itself, and it cannot be held against you afterwards. Obstructing a search that is being lawfully conducted is a completely different matter, and it is an offence in its own right, entirely separate from whatever they were looking for in the first place. So if he names a power and proceeds, you comply. You do not stand in front of the door. You do not put your hands on anything. You do not start a debate about whether his grounds are good enough, because the roadside is not where that gets decided. If the grounds were rubbish, that is argued afterwards, in a complaint, in a solicitor's letter, in court if it goes that far, where there is a written record and somebody impartial reading it. You almost never win it on the pavement, and men who try usually make their own position worse. First, the honest one about the door itself. A locked door is not a legal shield. If the grounds exist, the power exists, and the lock does not defeat it. Anybody telling you a locked car cannot be searched in this country is selling you something. What the lock actually does is stop the search happening by default. It makes somebody say out loud which power they are using, instead of the whole thing sliding past on your good manners. That is worth a great deal, and it is not the same as protection. Passengers have their own position and are not simply part of the car. A power to search a vehicle is not automatically a power to search everybody sitting in it, and the two questions are decided separately. And before any search, there is information he is supposed to give you: who he is, which station he is from, what he is looking for, the grounds, and that you are entitled to a record of it. If none of that is offered, asking for it is entirely reasonable, and it is not aggressive. It is asking somebody to do the thing they were going to have to do anyway. The record matters more than people realize. A search that was properly grounded gets written up without difficulty. A search that was not is where the paperwork becomes vague, and vague paperwork is the thing that loses cases for the people who conducted the search. Asking for the record is not a threat. It is simply making the written version exist, while everybody still remembers what happened. On getting out of the car. Section 163 is a duty to stop, and that is what it says. There are separate powers in specific circumstances, and I am not going to list them here because I have not checked every one of them, and I will not guess on camera about something that could get you arrested. So let me play the whole thing out end to end, because a rule you have only heard described is not the same as one you have heard used. It is about 11:30 on a Tuesday. You are 2 miles from your house, and you have been pulled over on a road you drive every day of your life. He asks whether there is any reason you are in the area tonight, and you say you would rather not discuss your evening, thank you. He tries the handle. It holds. He says, "Unlock your car for me." And you do not press the button, you say the sentence, in the same voice you have used for everything else so far, which is the voice of a man giving directions to a stranger. And now one of two things happens. This is the part worth sitting with, because both of them are fine for you, and that is the whole reason the sentence is built the way it is. He names a power, section 1 of PACE, reasonable grounds to suspect stolen or prohibited articles, and you unlock it, step back, and let him work. That is a lawful search, and you have lost nothing. Or he does not name anything. He says something about officer safety, or about how this would all be easier if you cooperated, or he asks again in a slightly different voice. And you say the same sentence again, in the same tone, because you have nothing to add to it. That is the whole technique. Not a clever argument, not a new fact, no escalation, the same sentence, in the same tone, until somebody either states a power or stops asking. Most of the time it takes saying twice. And I want to be honest about how it usually ends, because I am not going to pretend this is a magic trick. Usually he shrugs, hands your license back, and you drive home. There is no dramatic moment, nobody apologizes, and you will lie in bed afterwards wondering whether you were rude. You were not. You were the only person at that window who knew what the rule was. So, you must stop, and there is nothing in that duty about your door. Your consent is not what makes a search lawful, and Code A 1.5 says an officer must not search without a power, even if you agree. Grounds needs a genuine suspicion and an objective basis, both. And declining consent is lawful, while obstructing a lawful search is an offence. And the sentence, one last time, because this is the bit worth screenshotting. I'm not consenting to a search. If you have grounds, tell me the power and I won't obstruct you. 2 clauses. The first closes the shortcut and the second keeps you out of trouble, and neither of them is rude. One last thing, and it comes before anything I sell. If you are ever taken into custody, the duty solicitor is free at any hour of the day or night, and asking for one is never held against you. Nobody at that desk will remind you of that, and it is the most valuable sentence on this channel. If this was useful, subscribe. I put one of these out most weeks, and the next one is worth having before you need it rather than after. Know the line before you're standing on it.